Mist cloaks the fields of Bethlehem, where the dawn quietly paints its first rays of light. There, an unnamed woman walks, carrying the weight of a foreign land's past, Moab. Ruth, unbeknownst to all, becomes the thread of destiny, weaving a simple loyalty into the legacy of King David. Could an outsider, forgotten by the world, shift the course of God's plan? Her story stands as a testament to grace, where faith triumphs over every adversity, where hope blooms amid sorrow. Ruth's journey is more than a tale. It's a reminder that God always pens new chapters for those who dare to believe. Join us to uncover this untold story. Follow our channel to walk alongside us, to feel the power of grace radiating across America. The sun blazed fiercely over the Moab desert, where dry, relentless winds swept red dust across the barren land. In a quiet corner of this pagan territory, Naomi's family once found a flicker of hope. They had fled Bethlehem to escape famine, carrying dreams of a new life. Naomi, a mother with gentle eyes, built a home in this foreign land alongside her husband and 2 sons. But Moab, with its parched fields and strange gods, offered no lasting peace. Time passed and cruel fate struck. Naomi's husband died, leaving her with her 2 sons, the final sparks of light in her heart. Yet even that comfort was fleeting. One by one, her sons slipped away from this world, leaving Naomi in utter desolation. In the harsh desert, she became a silent shadow, carrying a shattered heart. Amid her pain, Naomi was not alone. Ruth, her daughter-in-law from the land of Moab, emerged as an unexpected beacon in the darkness. Ruth was not an Israelite, not bound by the covenant's bloodline, yet her heart brimmed with a love that transcended all boundaries. She had married Naomi's son, and over the years their bond blossomed, strong as vines clinging to stone. When Naomi, now a widowed woman, resolved to return to Bethlehem, she refused to drag Ruth into an uncertain journey. "Go back to your home, to your people," Naomi urged, her voice trembling, her eyes blurred with tears. She wanted Ruth to find a new life, a chance to start over. But Ruth, with steadfast eyes and a heart ablaze, chose a different path. Under Moab's scorching sun, Ruth clasped Naomi's hand, not to bid farewell, but to make a sacred vow. She didn't waver, didn't hesitate. "Where you go, I will go. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God," she declared, her voice soft yet resolute, like an oath carved into the earth. It was more than a daughter-in-law's loyalty. It was a bold act of faith, a leap into the unknown. Ruth, the obscure Moabite woman, abandoned her homeland, her family, and all that was familiar to follow Naomi, and more profoundly, to follow the God of Israel. That promise, echoing through the desert, was the first spark of a greater story, a story of grace waiting to unfold. The journey back to Bethlehem was far from easy. The dusty road stretched long, and the 2 women, one frail with age, the other young but burdened by loss, walked in silence. Naomi, her silver hair catching the wind, bore the grief of a mother who had lost her children. Ruth, with her slender but sturdy shoulders, carried a fragile hope that Bethlehem might offer a new chapter. They had nothing but each other, no wealth, no kin, only an invisible thread of loyalty and a faith growing in Ruth's heart. Behind them, Moab faded into a distant memory. Ahead, Bethlehem loomed faintly, where destiny awaited. Ruth, the story begins here, not with glory or power, but with loss and a courageous choice. Her loyalty, like a small flame burning in the desert, lit a path toward grace. Could a foreign woman tested by fate become part of God's grand plan? Ruth's journey will reveal the answer, and it beckons us to reflect. Have you ever chosen loyalty, even when everything seemed to crumble? Stay with us to discover how Ruth transforms sorrow into hope, and how God weaves miracles from broken hearts. The sun poured over Bethlehem's fields like a blanket of fire, draping golden, ripened barley that swayed in the breeze. Harvest season had arrived, bringing with it the bustling rhythm of village life. Women with headscarves and nimble hands cut stalks and chatted lively. Yet amid the crowd, a quiet figure stood out, not for her appearance, but for an unmistakable difference. Ruth, the Moabite woman, walked this foreign land, her bare feet touching the dry earth, her eyes flickering with resolve tinged with unease. She didn't belong here, and the people of Bethlehem knew it. After the long journey from Moab, Ruth and Naomi had reached Bethlehem, but the village that was once Naomi's home now felt like a distant memory. Naomi, the widowed mother with a heavy heart, withdrew into their small house where memories of her lost family haunted every corner. The famine had passed, but scarcity clung to them. Naomi, her face etched with hardship and her eyes clouded, seemed to have lost all hope. God has forsaken me, she thought, as the darkness of grief enveloped her soul. But Ruth, the foreign daughter-in-law, refused to let despair win. She gazed at the fields stretching before her, where golden barley promised life, and resolved to act. Each morning before dawn could chase away the mist, Ruth left their humble home and stepped into the fields to glean, the work of the poorest. The scattered grains, overlooked by harvesters, were her and Naomi's only sustenance. With calloused hands, Ruth bent low among the stalks, gathering each tiny grain, heedless of the scorching sun and sweat rolling down her brow. But the hardship wasn't just the labor. The people of Bethlehem, though not openly hostile, eyed her with suspicion. "The Moabite," they whispered, their voices laced with curiosity and distance. To them, Ruth was an outsider, shadowed by a nation once seen as Israel's foe. Each glance, each murmur, pierced her pride like a needle. Yet Ruth let none of it deter her. She worked with quiet diligence, as if every grain were a prayer, a way to shield Naomi, the mother-in-law who had become her only family. In their small home, Naomi sat in silence, her frail hands clasped tightly. Too weak to join the fields, her heart still followed Ruth. Each evening when Ruth returned with a meager basket of grain, Naomi bowed her head, whispering prayers. "Lord, have mercy on my daughter-in-law," she pleaded, her voice trembling but fervent. Those prayers, like a gentle breeze, drifted over the fields, blending into Bethlehem's pulse, and it seemed God was listening. One day, amid the sun-drenched fields, a man appeared, carrying an air of authority yet warm eyes. It was Boaz, the field's owner, a respected man in the village. He walked through the rows, observing the workers, but his gaze lingered on Ruth. Something about her diligence, her humility, or perhaps the glow of her loyalty, caught his attention. "Who is this woman?" he asked the foreman, his voice deep but brimming with curiosity. Boaz didn't know that moment marked the start of a transformation. Ruth, unaware, was stepping into a greater plan woven by the hand of grace. She continued bending in the fields, gathering grains, undaunted by the villagers' stares or the unease in her heart. Every step she took, every drop of sweat that fell, testified to her loyalty, not only to Naomi, but to the faith she embraced when she left Moab. Naomi, in her silent prayers, began to sense a faint glimmer of hope. Could God be opening a new path? Could Ruth, the woman deemed an outsider, find a place to belong in Bethlehem? Ruth's story from this point begins to reveal the light of grace amid the shadows of hardship. Her diligence and faith, like seeds sown in dry soil, await their time to sprout. But the road ahead remains fraught with challenges. Can Ruth overcome prejudice and find acceptance? Stay with us to uncover how an obscure woman becomes a witness to divine justice and the power of hope. Night fell over Bethlehem, draping the threshing floor in a veil of stillness. The silvery moonlight cast gentle beams, illuminating golden piles of barley where the scent of harvest lingered. A soft breeze carried the chill of night, but Ruth's heart burned with a daring resolve. She stood there, clad in a simple cloak, her eyes shimmering with determination laced with anxiety. The threshing floor, now empty of workers, held only Boaz, the field's owner, bedding among the grain. This was the moment Naomi, with a mother's wisdom, had prepared Ruth for. A risky step, yet brimming with hope. In their small home, Naomi had clasped Ruth's hands, her eyes sparking with rare light after months of darkness. "My daughter, it's time we seek a home, a redeemer," she said, her voice low but laden with purpose. By Israel's law, a kinsman could redeem land and protect widows, sheltering them under his care. Boaz, the kind man who noticed Ruth in the fields, was Naomi's hope. But to request redemption, Ruth had to cross the threshold of fear, confronting Boaz in an extraordinary setting. Under the moon at the threshing floor. It was more than a bold act. It was a leap of faith, placing everything in God's hands and the kindness of a stranger. Ruth took a deep breath, her cloak swaying as she stepped across the threshing floor. The moonlight lit her path, as if guiding her forward. Her heart pounded, not just from the audacity of her actions, but from their weight. As a Moabite, she knew she held no standing in many eyes, yet her loyalty to Naomi and her growing faith propelled her onward. She knelt beside Boaz, who slept soundly, and gently pulled his blanket over his feet. A humble gesture, a silent plea for protection. When Boaz stirred awake, his eyes traced Ruth's silhouette in the moonlight. There was no anger, no suspicion, only surprise mingled with curiosity. Ruth, with a soft but steady voice, poured out her heart. She didn't ask for herself but for Naomi, pleading for Boaz to become their redeemer, to restore hope to a broken family. Boaz sat up, the moonlight highlighting his thoughtful face, his eyes deep with reflection. He didn't rush to answer, but his heart seemed touched. "You are a woman of honor," he said, his voice warm with admiration. He knew of Ruth's loyalty, how she left Moab, forsaking an easier life to stay with Naomi. In that society, a foreign woman like Ruth could be overlooked, but Boaz saw what others missed. A courageous heart, a genuine faith. He bowed his head, whispering a prayer, as if sensing God's hand guiding this moment. The moonlight, brighter than ever, seemed a sign of grace, a promise that Ruth's story was far from over. But Ruth's act was far from simple. She had placed herself in a vulnerable position, open to misunderstanding or rejection. If Boaz refused, or if the village learned of this, her honor could be shattered. Yet Ruth acted not for honor, but for love and faith. She trusted that God, who led her from Moab to Bethlehem, would not abandon her now. And Boaz, with rare kindness, not only accepted her plea, but vowed to act rightly by the law, protecting both her and Naomi. He sent her home before dawn with a basket brimming with grain and a promise to pursue redemption. As Ruth returned, the moonlight still gleamed in the sky. She stepped into their small home where Naomi waited, her eyes lighting up at the sight of the grain and the story. A fragile hope flickered in their hearts. Ruth's courage had opened a new door, but could Boaz fulfill his promise? Would grace truly triumph over prejudice? Ruth's story from here takes a dramatic turn. Stay with us to discover how the courage and faith of a foreign woman change everything, bringing light to those who believe in divine justice. The midday sun blazed over Bethlehem's city gate, where a restless crowd gathered, their murmurs laced with tension and curiosity. The gate, with its towering stone walls, was more than a place for settling disputes. It was a stage for destiny. Today, all eyes fixed on Boaz, the dignified man standing tall amid the throng, his gaze sharp yet calm. Across from him stood another man, a kinsman of Naomi, with the right to redeem her land and the fate of two widows. In the distance, Ruth lingered quietly, her cloak veiling her face, but her heart pounded with hope, tangled with fear. This was the defining moment. Would she, a Moabite, be embraced in God's greater plan? After that moonlit night at the threshing floor, Boaz had vowed to act. His promise, spoken under the stars, was more than a man's kindness. It was a sacred commitment, as if God himself were weaving a tapestry of grace. But the path to redemption was far from simple. By Israel's law, a closer kinsman held the first right to redeem Naomi's land and marry Ruth to preserve the family line. Boaz, though his heart leaned toward Ruth, had to face this man before the people, in a negotiation that stretched beyond land to the very lives of two widowed women. Ruth, on the crowd's edge, felt their stares. They knew who she was, the Moabite, the outsider once met with suspicion. Would they accept her, or would prejudice prevail? Boaz stepped forward, his voice ringing clear, commanding the crowd's attention. He laid out Naomi's plight, a widow who had lost everything, and the land that needed redemption to secure her. The crowd listened, but the air grew heavy as he pressed on. The other kinsman, his eyes keen, nodded, agreeing to redeem the land. Boaz, unflinching, continued, his voice steady yet compelling. He declared that redeeming the land came with the duty to marry Ruth, the Moabite widow, to preserve Naomi's lineage. His words sent a chill through the crowd. Redeeming land was one thing, but marrying a foreigner. The kinsman hesitated, his gaze flickering to Ruth, then to the crowd. The cost of honor, of responsibility, seemed too great. At last, he shook his head, relinquishing his right to Boaz. A soft sigh rippled through the crowd, but Ruth stood frozen, her heart suspended. Would she truly be welcomed? Boaz seized the moment, stepping before the people, his voice rising like a sacred proclamation. He would redeem Naomi's land, marry Ruth, and protect both women. The crowd, so long accustomed to eyeing Ruth with doubt, softened. An elderly woman, her headscarf framing her face, stepped forward, raising her hand in blessing. "May the Lord bless this young woman," she said, her voice trembling. "And Boaz, who has brought us hope." Other blessings followed. like a swelling wave, from those once distant now opening their hearts. Ruth, her eyes brimming with tears, felt the shift. The people of Bethlehem, who once questioned her, now embraced her, not just as a Moabite widow, but as a woman of loyalty and faith. That moment felt like a miracle. Ruth, who once gleaned under the scorching sun, enduring scornful glances, now stood at the city gate, enveloped by grace. Boaz, with his integrity and kindness, had turned a moonlit promise into reality. But deeper still, God's hand was at work, crafting a story far beyond what Ruth or Naomi could have dreamed. This redemption was not just about land or marriage. It was about acceptance, about divine justice overcoming prejudice, about a foreigner finding a home among God's people. As the crowd dispersed, Ruth approached Boaz, her eyes gleaming with gratitude. No words were needed. They knew this journey was not theirs alone, but part of a greater plan, where grace transformed broken hearts into eternal legacies. Yet the story doesn't end here. Today's redemption is only the first step toward Ruth's greater role. Stay with us to uncover how Ruth's journey paves a path to King David and beyond, to the Savior himself. As dusk settled over Bethlehem, a gentle golden light bathed the barley fields, as if heaven and earth joined in a song of praise. In a modest home tucked within the tranquil village, the sound of a child's laughter pierced the evening's calm. Ruth, now a wife and mother, sat beside a wooden cradle, her eyes sparkling with joy as she gazed at her infant son, Obed, sleeping soundly. Boaz, her husband with his warm smile, stood beside her, his strong hand resting gently on her shoulder, sharing the sacred moment. At the window, Naomi, the mother-in-law once drowned in sorrow, now smiled, her face aglow with a newfound radiance, as if God had restored all she had lost. Ruth's journey from the barren deserts of Moab to Bethlehem's vibrant fields was a story no one in this village could have foreseen. She was once a foreigner, an obscure widow, bending low to glean under the scorching sun, enduring the skeptical glances of the townsfolk. Yet her unwavering loyalty to Naomi and her budding but fierce faith in God carried her through trials that seemed insurmountable. From her vow in the desert, to her bold step at the threshing floor, to her acceptance at the city gate, Ruth proved that God's grace knows no boundaries of origin or circumstance. She, a Moabite, became part of Israel's people, not merely through marriage to Boaz, but through a legacy far greater. Obed, the child sleeping peacefully in his cradle, was more than Ruth and Boaz's joy. He was a bridge to the future. This boy would become the grandfather of King David, Israel's great king, a heart turned toward God. And from David's line, centuries later, the Savior would come. Jesus, the light of all humanity. Ruth, once an outsider on the margins, now stood as a central figure in God's grand plan. Her story is not just about a family's redemption, but about how grace transforms broken hearts and seemingly insignificant lives into pillars of hope and salvation. Naomi, seated by the hearth, cradled Obed as he stirred, her eyes brimming with tears. She recalled the dark days in Moab, when death stole her husband and sons, when she believed God had turned away. But now in her arms was a child, a symbol of new life, of the love and loyalty Ruth brought. Naomi was no longer a lonely widow, but a grandmother, enveloped by the love of family and God's grace. The people of Bethlehem, who once doubted Ruth, now shared her story with awe. a testament that God works in ways no one can predict. Ruth's story carries a timeless message. God's grace has no limits. It reaches the humblest, the forgotten, and transforms them into history's changemakers. Ruth's simple loyalty opened a path to King David and the Savior. She reminds us that faith, however small, can work wonders. In America today, where challenges and divisions persist, Ruth's story is a call. Will you choose loyalty like hers, even when the path ahead is unclear? Will you trust that grace can transform your life as it did hers? Share this story with those you love, letting the message of loyalty and grace spread across America. Subscribe to our channel to explore more inspiring Bible stories, tales that remind us God is always writing new chapters for those who dare to believe. Together, let's let the light of faith shine from ancient Bethlehem to every home today.